studying the silence and the violence that punctuates it. That's the job here in southern Mariupol, where life in the ruins waits for Ukraine's counteroffensive to push the Russians right out of their space. Ludmila hasn't left since the war began and knows her artillery.
Літає, воно таке роздається ехо. А як хрустить, то ви чуєте вихлопи з того.
It's all they've had to do as they wait down here with only a radio. They say it brought their best news yet this day, learning the Russians have bombed themselves by accident in Belgorod. Recently, Nina thinks she's noticed a change in the bangs.
Обстріли не такі ми чуємо. Бува там, що прильоти серйозні, ну вже якось воно чи далі, чи якесь, чи наче оружие, чи я не знаю. Да, оце як почалась війна, от там, що ми ще не знали цього всього, було саме найстрашніше. А зараз воно вже, звісно, привичка це погане діло, ну трошки привикли до цього всього.
Drive out into the plains earlier this week, and the signs are there in the tracks, in the berms, that Ukraine might be aiming south to cut Crimea off from Russia. It's quiet, then loud. With the Russians firing from close by, drone operators fly in gaps between electronic jamming. In these open fields here, each side trying to spot the other, weaken the other, ahead of this counter-offensive. One road is their target, the cars, the buildings, tiny changes and signs of weakness. Are they getting ready for the counter-offensive or just doing nothing?
А вони готуються постійно риють окопи, постійно траншеї з'являються, постійно десь їздить якась техніка, в тому числі інженерна. Так що так вони готуються.
Yards from his head, a Russian booby trap left behind. It's not clear if the Russians they're facing now have similar experience.
Вони тренуються тут трохи далі. Там полігон у них є тут.
After 90 minutes, each drone parachutes down again, soon replaced by another. Fly, spot, shell and repeat. The waiting and watching will soon be over. Now, Erin, it remains unclear exactly when this counter-offensive may begin. There are indications as we drive around those areas of movement, of vehicles, of the potential for something to happen, but it's so unclear. But it's so vital for Ukraine to seize this moment, to regain yet more territory from the Russians ahead of potentially another winter stalemate later on this year. So much NATO weaponry headed their way and so many Western expectations that it will be decisively used. So a lot riding on the days or weeks ahead. Erin?
All right, thank you very much, Nick, from Ukraine tonight. And I want to go now to retired Air Force Colonel Cedric Leighton and Steve Hall, who is the former CIA chief of Russia operations. So, Colonel, can I just start with that Russian bombing of a Russian city, Belgorod, right? And they're flying over Belgorod every day when they're going to Ukraine, right? And it is a big city, and it's a Russian city. 400,000 people live there. You're a former Air Force pilot. What did you think when you heard about the Russians dropping a bomb on their own city?
Well, Erin, to tell you the truth, I thought, how could you make a mistake like that? And it was really interesting to me because what they're doing is they're using Russian territory, of course, as a standoff launch area to go get into Ukraine and target Ukrainian targets. But this thing went horribly wrong if it wasn't a deliberate act. The other thing that occurred to me is that it could potentially be a deliberate act because the bomb actually impacted on a major road intersection in the middle of Belgorod. So this is, a key indicator that something is going terribly wrong with the way the Russians are preparing themselves for this.
So can I just ask as a quick follow-up there, if they had done it on purpose, that it was a purposeful act, for what purpose?
Would be to sabotage the war effort, to indicate that there's something wrong with the orders that they're receiving, and they want to, in essence, protest this if it is an act like that.
It's pretty incredible to even contemplate that possibility, Steve. I mean, this is an Su-34 warplane, right? They brag about them all the time, right? They're very proud of this. They're incredibly proud of their Air Force, right? That's the elite group. So what does this say about the reality?
Yeah, I mean, if Cedric is right about that, I mean, that would be fascinating because it would essentially mean you've got some sort of rebellion going on inside the Russian military. There are other possibilities. We have seen reporting that the Russians have been trying to get microchips from wherever they can, refrigerators, anything that's got a chip in it to make a dumb bomb a smart bomb. Yeah. So, they could have tried to do that and it simply failed. It could also be incompetence because we have seen some real difficulty in terms of the recruiting and training across the Russian military. And it's possible you could have simply an incompetent pilot or some other part of the military that caused this to happen. But I mean, it's amazing in Belgrade, they were worrying about Ukrainians, attacking. And now kids in those schools are having to duck and cover because of their own pilots. So it's just an amazing situation.
I mean, it truly is. It's just sort of jaw on the floor to try to even imagine this. So, Colonel, this is in the context, right, of the difficulty training and recruiting that Steve just mentioned. And those raids that I was telling everyone about a moment ago, now in Moscow, right? I know people who have friends there who talk about, it's happening now when you go down to the subway, right, that they're looking for young men. But this story was of this 21-year-old's apartment raided, handcuffed, taken to a military enlistment office because his deferment had just expired. And then he joins, he says, out of complete psychological pressure. And we do understand this isn't the only time, right? This is happening in other places, in Moscow, again, and that is significant, the capital. What does this tell you about the truth about Putin's army?
Well, I think Putin's army has become very much a hollow army. And, as Steve indicated, when it comes to the training part of this, they need replacements quickly. And one way to get them is to draft as many people, in essence, impress as many people as possible into the Russian army. And that's what we're seeing here, Erin.
So, Steve, another interesting thing happened today, okay? And the Wagner Group head, Yevgeny Prigozhin, he said that the son of Dmitry Peskov, right, who is perhaps the Kremlin spokesperson who has been incredibly close to Putin over decades, right, that his son, Peskov's son, is in the Wagner Group, served as a gunner. Now, Peskov has not responded to CNN's request for comment on this, but what would this say to you about the relationship between the Wagner Group, Prigozhin, and Putin, if Peskov's son was indeed serving with Wagner?
Yeah, this is a fascinating storyline, and it's sort of another chapter in the Prigozhin Chronicles, if you will. So you got Dmitry Peskov, a very high-ranking guy. We see him on television all the time, not usually saying anything of much value, but we see him a lot. He's clearly close to the Kremlin, and there have been questions about what's going to happen with his son, who is of, fighting age in Russia. And he's been somewhat defensive about this. So now there's this Prigozhin comment that, oh yeah, he served in the Wagner Group. It's unclear as to whether or not Prigozhin continues to see a political future for himself, ascending inside of the Kremlin, perhaps even replacing some of the leadership there, Putin. And is that why he's trying to gain friends like Peskov? If so, I mean, it's an amazing breaking of the Kremlin rules about how you play politics in that country. It's a very dangerous thing, but it's so much of this is Byzantine and behind the scenes. It's difficult to see what Prigozhin is up to with Peskov on this particular story.
Yeah, it's an amazing storyline, though, because, we know it's something. It's just so hard to tell exactly what. Thank you both so very much. I appreciate it.